Yes. Hello, all. Before I start, I just wanted to know if I'm clear and audible. If somebody can just let me know.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you
Are
so
in
much.
clear.
Thank you so much. So, hello, everyone. A very good evening. Myself, Ekta Dubey, and on behalf of the Analytics team and our partner, Espresso.ai, we welcome you all and thank you for being part of our webinar, Digital Transformation Using Machine Learning. Series 1, that is MLOps, as an enabler for the data scientist. So before we start a webinar, there are a few guidelines I would like to highlight and make you people aware of. Requesting all our attendees to be on mute when the speakers are taking the session. We have set certain guidelines for asking the question to the speakers. We'll have a Q&A session with our speakers today. The guidelines are you need to raise your hands, unmute yourself on your video, introduce your name, company designation, and put your question to the concerned speaker. So before I start, I would like to introduce a partner, Espresso.ai. Espresso.ai enables to manage, build, and automate the entire AI ML application lifecycle from research to production with an integrated unified platform. With security, governance, and compliance as the core foundations of the platform, Espresso.ai relieves data scientists from the concerns of DevOps and deployment, leave them to focus on doing what they do best, building models and algorithms. A little highlight on the webinar why we are all here today. Artificial intelligence and machine learning remains the hottest topic in the financial world for the past few years. Implementing machine learning solutions to boost business profitability remains the first measurable goal of digital transformation strategy. A lot is being talked about MLOps as a clone of DevOps for machine learning. Today, we are here to gain expert insights from the industry leaders from South African financial services industry who are going to talk about the importance of MLOps and how our MLOps platform helping data scientists and data engineers. So first, I would like to introduce our speakers from the South Africa. Introducing Paul Morley, Executive Group Data Service Nedbank. To speak about him, with almost 30 years of experience in IT and data with IBM and Nedbank, he is leading a team of world-class data professionals. He is responsible for delivering Nedbank's regulatory commitments to various regulatory bodies that governs the financial sector. He is also principal in delivering data analytical services to Nedbank's business clusters. Our speaker, Masiaj Kaliska, Chief Data Officer, Corporate and Investment Banking, APSA Group. To speak about him, Masia's passion is to deliver data as a valuable asset and catalyst to any division and uses his broad and technical expertise to galvanize insights into action to drive change in the right way. This led to Masiaj being nominated for the Global Top 100 Innovators in Data and Analytics in 2020. Outside of work, Masiaj has keen interest in fitness, nutrition, mountain biking, and cars, and is actively building out practical analytical insights focused on improving health and mental awareness in all facets of life with a core passion to help people. Our speaker, Mr. R Krishna Kumar, has over 25 years of experience with proven expertise in architecting large systems and designing enterprise word solutions for data management. He has worked at IBM, T.J. Watson Research Center, New York, USA, and has co-authored several pioneering technical papers and research reports and 2 international patents. KK received his BTech and MTech degrees from IIT Mumbai. And now I would like to invite Mr. Jaspal Singh, Vice President Market Development with Abzuba. He has 20 years of experience, functional experience with startups and mid-sized companies. He loves to execute business planning. At Espresso.ai, he is building user base for Espresso.ai across industries and across geographies. Over to you, Mr. Jaspal, to start your session and take over. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ekta. Thank you, Paul and Maches and KK for joining. So to start with the context of why we are, I hope you all are able to see my screen.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So Before we move into the discussion on what is AI, I would like to ask maybe Paul, how do you define digital transformation? Because we have audience who are data scientists, and there are some who are not from a data science community. So if you can just outline what is digital transformation and how is AI linked to digital transformation? Paul, you are.
Paul, you're on mute, Paul.
Gotcha. Apologies. So, in my view, digital transformation is any transformation where digital is the core to your business, which is the gravity of your business, where you are exploiting future-based systems, be that cloud, be that AI, be that automation, be that linguistics automation, any of those future technologies that the fourth industrial age is based on, and that it becomes pivotal to your business, or is pivotal to your business, or it's core to your strategy, or it's core to your service, or it's core to your engagement with the customer. So that's sort of at a high level what, in my view, what digital transformation is, where you transfer your existing business into more of a digital business. Now, it's a little bit of an oxymoron for me because let's think about it. Banks, for the most part, are inherently digital. They don't produce anything, they don't make anything. What they do is they store your cash, and they manage your cash flows and all those good things. So inherently, the bank for the most part is digital. Yes, they've got physical channels, but the product of a bank is mostly digital. So it's anywhere where you have those core digital future systems that play a role in participating in your business, or drive your business, or is a product of your business, is digital. And the transformation piece is that leg going over from a traditional business into a more of a digital business as you roll forward. Not really a big thing for as an example, maybe for a banks. I think banks are less affected by this digital transformation than most other industries are. If you think about manufacturing, if you think about farming, if you think about all the automotive industries and all of those other good things, there's a bigger impact to them. I mean, as a whole, we like to think in banking that we're special and we're definitely impacted by this, but I think for the most part, we're probably the least sector that's impacted by this digital transformation. So it really is automation of your business, automate your business, digitize your business. So yes, that's sort of my view on digital transformation at a very high level.
I agree with you, Paul. I think, yeah, you mentioned that banks have always been kind of a digital, because they are the ones who are always working with the data and automation. So I'll have the next question with Matches. How do you relate to AI? Because I was having some understanding of the African market, and the discussion was around that the talk of AI is not about augmenting anything. It is like replacing humans, or replacing the manual process, and there is a lot of apprehension and buy-in. May not be true for financial services, but my question to Matches is that how do you define AI in the context of banking in South Africa, whether they are ahead of the curve, or they're just catching up, or they are just about to start off when they compare themselves to the banks in maybe US or Europe, or maybe even the South Asian markets?
Great question. And I think, to support what Paul said, can you guys hear me clearly?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Just to support what Paul said, I think what I'm actually doing at the moment is demystifying what AI is, right? We, at the moment, are not short of companies addressing kind of AI as a silver bullet that will solve everything in our space. As Paul rightly mentioned, sometimes people think that banks are special. We sometimes think we are special, but actually, at the end of the day, we're an organization just trying to do what's best by our customers. And essentially, AI for us at the moment now, it's a two-way road, right? For us, if you understand what AI is and what it does and the potential of it, and if you break it down into the elements that you can apply it into the business, where it truly drives value for the business, not for the data teams, for the business, then we can land that concept very clearly and clearly identify or articulate it for those areas that need AI in a sense. But at the moment, I'm just fighting off a lot of agencies trying to sell us, or companies trying to sell us, that magic dust of sprinkling AI and it just solves everything. You know, that's not the reality. Especially if you work at a bank, a South African bank, and I think Paul also laugh around the amount of legacy and technical debt that we have to go through first before we even think about applying AI is, you know, it's an immense process. And, you know, garbage in, garbage out. If we start playing with stuff that's too early in the game, then we're also going to have the wrong insights and address the wrong clients, you know, with you know, incorrect things that was not supposed to say to them. So we're trying to mitigate that. But at the end of the day, how I explain it's a feature to connect the world around us, right? So there's a lot of signals, new things that are popping up. There are new elements and technologies that are being placed all over the bank, especially in our space. What AI can do is start helping us connect those worlds, connect the dots, connect the intelligence, and have a golden thread through it so that we can make an accurate and transparent decision as an entity, rather than having these cottage industries of intelligence bubbling up, everyone saying we're using AI and these are the models that we need to build. At the end of the day, as Paul rightly said, we have to serve our clients. We're a bank, that's our priority. The back-end stuff needs to work as efficiently as possible, and AI is a mechanism or a feature to get to that optimism. You know, like we come in and it's a good point, right? As soon as we start mentioning AI, people are like, oh no, robots are going to replace us. There's going to be these fake people sitting in the tellers and helping people. Like robotics, AI, all of this stuff gets muddled together, and it's this concept that people have in their minds of what it actually is. But we're trying to address it, you know, day by day. I just feels like I'm repeating myself over and over to the bankers that it's not here to replace you. It's here to help you at the end of the day. And if you've watched any of the AI movies that have come out in the last 10 years, it also it doesn't help our cause. So it's something that we keep constantly trying to make sure that people understand the true essence of what the capability is in the context of what the business value and what that value needs to deliver to the customer at the end of the day. That's still the most important thing we're focusing on.
Perfect message. Thanks. I think those are very insightful thoughts. So two thoughts which I'll pick up. I think when you say demystify, I have very pretty, you know, high frequent discussions with KK offline on the demystifying the AI thing. And, you know, he says, you know, the companies who are into AI solutions, they approach businesses as if, you know, they are the ones who are the experts and you are the ones who are running, but, you know, your functional expertise is useless. It is only our tool which is going to help you and, you know, transform your businesses. And it is like that, you know, you are being enlightened by those, you know, vendors who are trying to, you know, sell you products of AI and, you know, automate something on the customer service side, or maybe at the back end for some process automation. So what I would like to, so as a second understanding that I have when we talk to customers across, not in US but outside of US, is that, you know, how do we go about, you know, is it a software? Is it an application that you'll give us, which we will use and, you know, and we will use it perpetually? Or is it, what is it? You know, is it your application? Can I use it? So that is also a thought, which is something where I would request KK, if you can lay a basic fundamental of what has been a software development process and how an AI system works, which will only enhance what Paul and Message has tried to say, that, you know, a digital transformation idea, what is an AI, and then you are outlining how is AI system built, you know, the broad process outline from your side, please.
Sure. So before I start, I just wanted to make sure I pronounce your name correctly. Is it Machies or
Matches?
Matches.
You could call me Maz. It's short. M-A-J.
Okay,
Maz, yeah.
That works. Maz, yes. So thank you very much, Maz, and thanks, Jaspal, for the opportunity. And I just kicking off what Paul and Maz said, you know, something very important is actually keeping the business people in mind when you're building any AI system. Now, I've been in this analytics field. It used to be called data mining, you know, for the last nearly 30 years. And we always get slotted as IT, where actually we want to talk to the business folks, right? When we go to, you know, present our services, and, you know, we're probably one of the guys that Maz talks about who come in and try to sell things, but we try to get to the business people, because at the end of the day, they have to be happy, and it's not, you know, it's not about the technology. And from both points of view, you know, both from the understanding the fear of AI as well as understanding what the business needs. It's very critical. So from that point of view, it's important to understand why AI is different from normal software development, because then once this is understood, then the business people don't just think of it as another application that I have to deal with or something of the sort. It is different, because in AI, essentially you're building models, and there's a lot of iterative process that goes around it. It's not linear. In some sense, software development is a linear process. You get your problem definition, you decide your technologies, and then you work at it. You obviously have delays and bugs and everything that is normal, but at the end of the day, you reach your destination. On the other hand, AI, sometimes even the problem is not very clear. For example, 10 years back, if somebody had said, build me a self-driving car, it's never been done before. So, how do you define success? Do you say 50% is success? Half the time I'll knock over a pedestrian and half the time I won't. Is that, acceptable? Obviously not. On the other hand, such problems are very new. And so success is very difficult to define. On top of that, then you have the technology. I mean, there are so many different technologies available today, and the typical work of a data scientist or an AI scientist is essentially very, very repetitive, very iterative. You go through dozens, sometimes hundreds of models, hundreds of experiments before you reach something that at least is partially successful. And that is a very, I define it as a spiral. You try something, it doesn't work, you pick something else, you read some research papers, you implement, etc. So you go around and eventually, hopefully, you reach your destination. So that is very important for even the business folks to understand, because if you look at AI as a typical software, I give you the requirements, why don't you build the damn system already? It's not going to work. So that's very critical to understand, Jaspal.
Perfect, KK. Perfect. So I'll have the following. So I think you have laid out the basic framework pretty well. So I think it is, of course, in the chart here, you can say there's a scope which is outlined what is to be solved. There's a data collection factor. Then you have to train some models, which is again an iterative process. And then in case the model is not working, you go back, tweak your data, tune your data to a way which is more accurate and consistent. And then when you deploy in real time is when you get the real insights, and then you keep tweaking the model to give you the right prediction. So of course, it is always an iterative process. So extending from here, I think I'll have this question from Maz and Paul, that, because of, you have this AI solution providers and the other companies coming in. If I am representing a company as a non-tech, as a business guy, and you can categorize my company, say, as a starter. I just don't understand AI. And if this kind of an answer when I get from KK that, it is not something of an application, it is like an iterative process, I would believe that, my judgment and intuition is better. And why would I get into the complexity of falling into this, what tech stack is to be done, some data has to go, some data lakes have to be created, the jargon around the architecture creation, and then, building the models, hiring data scientists, all those complexities are there. So what I'm trying to come to is that, how do you, in your experience, maybe Paul, you can start, and then Matches can take it further. How challenging is a tech stack? What tech stack to pick up? You have likes of SageMaker, you have Microsoft Azure, and then you have hundreds of other players who are, in some form, trying to sell you one of the data services across the AI layer, whether it is on the big data or front. So how is it, Paul? I'd like to have your thoughts on that.
So I want to touch on what Maz said and what KK said. There's a few things here. I think we complicate our own world. Okay, we confuse ourselves. There's a lot of hype, there's a lot of talk. There's a lot of fake stuff going around. There's a lot of sales. There's a lot of consulting. So let's just reset this for a moment. Because to answer your question, there's a few parodies. And I think, KK, you mentioned some stuff in here. And us techies and us data scientists don't do ourselves any good either. We don't do ourselves justice. So, what KK said, the first thing I said, well, the challenge, and I see this conversation come up often, it's always about tech and business. What do we do with tech? It's too technical, it's business, tech and business. It's not actually about that. Data scientists, and the techies and data scientists like to think they're technical people. So here's the first problem. Data scientists are not technical people, they're actually business people. Now, let's be very clear on this. They're business people. They are not techies. If they're business people, they should understand the business. The fact that business doesn't understand that and they hand it off to the techies to do is part of the problem. And the reason why I say that is banks have had quants for gazillion years. And Masjid will tell you, we've had quants for I don't know how long. I've been in the industry 30 years. We've had quants. What is a quant? A quant is a data scientist, but he specializes in the financial numbers and forecasting. There's nothing different. He trains models, he develops models, he pumps models through the system. So what's the difference between a quant, an analytical quant, and a data scientist? What's the difference? Nothing. Just the name. They use the same tools, they've got the same expertise, they even got the same background and skills. Mathematics, advanced engineering skills, they've got exactly the same skills. So fundamentally, data scientists are business people. So let's be clear. The fact that business doesn't understand that is the problem. Because they'll argue against it. Oh, no, this is too complex. Oh, rubbish. They've been doing it for years. And also, let's also understand, AI is not new. AI has been around, what's it now? 40 years. So since Jim Goodnight made it famous, because Jim Goodnight was the father of a lot of the AI algorithms from SAS. He heads up SAS and owns SAS. So he was the father of AI. He's been using AI for 40 years and developing it. So let's use that as a base. And that's the fact. Those are the facts. There's no stories. There's no marketing or hype behind it. That's exactly the facts. So let's talk about the complexity. Well, the complexity is no more complex than the quants function in business. It's no more complex than that. They use the same data. Pretty much they use the same tools. They've got the same skills. They've got the same background and education. So is it any more complex to those analytical functions in business? I don't think so. I really don't think so. So the first thing is our data scientists must accept that they are business. The fact that they currently report into a technical function is a misnomer. They're still business. So when I had this conversation, they need to understand more about business. Well, that means you don't have a very good data scientist if he doesn't understand the business. Because how are you going to get a data scientist to run models in a business he doesn't understand? Well, you can't. Look at the quants. So you've got to position this, and we get lost down this road, and it's a big passion, and it's sad because this hype of companies selling tools, consultants have created this misnomer. They've created this noise. They're the ones who put the divide in the first place because they sell tech. But and again, these structures we have, the world is based on people, process, and technology. That's the fundamentals of building any organization. We've been learning that in management skills and management degrees for the last 40 years. You start with the people, then it's the process and the technology. So you have the people that do the work, the processes, how they do the work, and the technology is how you automate the work. That's always been the fundamental for most organizations. But yet when you come to AI and technology and this age of disruption and future systems, we go to the other end first. We go to the technology side, and we ask that first. And then the business sits there with a tool, and then they try and figure out what they want to do with it. So I bought this tool, we've got a fancy AI, we can do all this stuff. All right, well, what are we going to do with it? Well, I don't know, but we bought it, it's like top notch. So this is the big problem when it comes to digital transformation and technologies. You shouldn't let technology drive your strategy. First, you need to understand who you are, okay? What is my business? Where do I want to go? And then you say, all right, how do I get there? And use technology to help you and assist you. Because a lot of this AI failures in models and all of that stuff, which talks to the ML and data ops and MLOps, talks very much to that. It's like, because I don't know who I am and what I do, and I've got all this fancy tool set, now we're going to try and make the tool work. That's the wrong way around. You must understand your business, who you are. You must have your identity and use these tools to fit. And if you're using these tools to drive and support a strategy, we wouldn't be asking the question like, this is a business thing. What's the failure rates? I'm not sure. And we have all these problems. And the reason why you have those conversations is because you didn't start at the beginning. And the beginning is the people around the strategy, the process, knowing your business. If you start at the technology, all these questions, I think, Chris, you mentioned as well. I mean, you've got all these questions, like you've got a problem with business and AI and complexities and how do we engage and support and all those things. The reason why you're having those issues and the reason why you're having those conversations, because you started with the tech first and not the people, and you don't understand your business. Because if you understand your business and you're building a data science team, you don't have that question about the data scientists don't understand their business. And it's not more complex than the risk management. And Mashek will tell you, in a bank, we have a risk management around finances that look after and forecast impairments and manage those advanced financial models. and in the economics of the country, where all the economics. So that's all data science. There's no real difference. The fact that you're dealing with a different topic is neither here nor there. It's still data science, and you're doing the same things. So I don't see there's a complexity question here. What I see is people don't understand what their business is, okay, and they're driving the focus from the wrong end of the spoon. They start with the tech. Of course you're going to get confused if you start there. Start this side. Do you know who you are? How is this stuff going to support you? Because I've seen organizations that implement all these fancy tools, advanced analytics, and they're getting 98% hit rates and 100% hit rates on the AI model, and they go, brilliant model, but it's not being used in the business, it's generating no money. So what's the point? They haven't embedded it as part of their product. They haven't embedded it as part of the organization. And if you don't do that, you can have all the fancy tools in the world. It ain't going to help you. So, and I think those are the fundamental questions. And I don't know if that answers your question, Jaspal, but for the reason why we had these questions is we starting at the wrong end of the stick. Data scientists are the same. We've had them for years. Now, why is it a problem? Because we start with the tech question first and we don't understand our business. That's the problem. And to answer those questions, if you're answering those questions, your business is in trouble. That's all I'm saying. You know, if you have this problem, then you're not ready for AI. Period. You have to walk away. You're like, go. If you're asking, we're not aligned or we don't know how to use it, don't do it because you're not ready for it. You don't even know who you are and you want it. You don't understand the technology and you want it. You don't understand the tool. That's why the vendors sell all this stuff, because you don't have a clue. You'll buy anything because it's world class. And I think that's the problem for me. That really, and I'm very passionate about this point. Stop buying technology. Start focusing on the people. Your identity. Do you know where you're going? Because if you don't know where you're going, then what's the point? And it's difficult to answer those questions, because if I answer those questions, your business is in trouble. You shouldn't be there. You shouldn't be asking those questions. And if you are answering these questions, you're not ready. You're not ready. Absolutely not ready.
I think, Paul, you have been very, very right on the saying that, it is the business need and the strategy which should be driving. And that is where, the role of a chief data officer, and specifically on your definition of a data scientist, we have on the other side of the world, there is somebody who's, there's a new function created, data analyst, who is presumed to be less technical and more business focused. And he's a kind of a bridge. Because, the way the talent is groomed, you have to be a data scientist who can do coding and who can work with large volumes of data. So he's a statistical guy. It is just the same fundamental problem, when we had this mathematicians and, PhDs in physics and mathematics trying to do something on the finance world and, quantitative and, large models. So, of course, there is, but I think, you have brought it very rightly that, it is the business challenge that is the core of the discussion. So on this, I think, Matches, I'd like to have your view, what should be so for example, taking an assumption of maybe a starter or somebody who has already adopted a couple of AI solutions, and they have an idea that, okay, this is the business need, I need to get more efficient. What kind of the considerations you would prefer? That is it a prerequisite that your data should be on cloud before you even think of automating any of the processes? When is it that you would like to structure your AI process? So while it is an iterative process, you will have this quant guys or the data science guys who are talking to business guys. They are doing some experiments. The business head is always focused on where is the impact. I think this guy is sitting on his computer doing something, but I don't see any impact of having him in the system. So much as I would like to have your thoughts on that, how do you structure, how do you make a data science or a quant guy productive and able to explain to the business what is he that he's trying to say? Because there is always a communication both sides. A business guy will always have a problem, and he would need a better solution than his own judgment or an experience or a gut feeling. And that is where a data scientist has to explain him with the stats, and he cannot still not be talking technical terms in terms of statistical, because statistics is something that a business head may not understand. So, he has to translate into a terminology which is where the business guy relates to. So in that context, where we are concerned about what is happening with the data science team, are they really delivering what is required for the business? How do you suggest what is a prerequisite for creating something on the structuring the whole AI process in a company?
So I think what we have to be, and this is something that Paul was passionately explaining, right, is the concept of segregation of duties and responsibility. We've simplified our capabilities into a data value chain. So what's owned in business, what business is accountable for, what we're supposed to do as a data team, and the value output that we are co-creating and partnering together. That's the major difference that we did in the last. So since I took over as Chief Data Officer that side, I really created that strong relationship and rapport with business to co-create that value together. Not to say, if we land this thing, then we will take that value into our team and we say we delivered X amount of value, yay. But we don't have a balance sheet. We don't have a P&L. That money is going to get accosted to who? It's the products that we need to push to our clients. It's the experience that we need to increase so that we have more transactions in specific sectors. So what we absolutely focused on is, like I said, a segregation of duties along the value chain. The first thing that we would ask is, right, well, if we're going to start something, what is the outcome that we want, right? Let's define an outcome together. Simply write me a sentence or 2 sentences of what you'll experience once you get this thing, that once you see the insight or see the thing that we're building together, what exactly do you want to see and look and feel from? And once we've combined the human emotion attached to this outcome, because we're all, it's still going to be humans accepting this new thing that we're building, even though it's a background of AI that's filtering it through to this person, that reception of what they're expecting is the most important thing for us to value, because then we can clearly articulate the value that we're targeting for business in their language, because we write it with them, we co-create it with them. And then working back, right, we say, okay, we're not, like Paul said, right? There's data scientists.
I think that is, very, very insightful matches. And why I'll pick it up is I'll ask KK, and maybe we get what you're saying is, even more further consolidated in a way that, when you're building a system, it is not about the technical details. It is about how to use it. And if it is not solving that purpose, that is where the challenge is. So, and that is where, KK, I would request your inputs on, an AI system is a function of a model and a data. So without getting into the technicalities, how would you suggest that, the gaps that are identified are very obvious, that, it is the business who has to talk and deliver, and it is always a tech guy who is only selling a tool is not going to be appreciated, because, the tool is a tool which is, I can have hundreds of any other tool to pick it up. But finally, who is the one who is selling the tool? Is he having the functional capability or the solutioning capability, and they have come up with a tool? So I would like to understand from you that, when you try to build in a best practices, because, finally, when a business problem has to be solved, it has to be made replicable and, repeatable and with better efficiency every time. So in that context, I would like to have inputs.
Sure. So first, I think Paul was very passionate about the point of the business being at the front of things, and I agree completely with that. And also his point about quants, being doing this for the last 50, 60 years, etc. And AI, I mean, it's pretty much the same thing. And you said, that they have the same background, the same skills. There's one point on which I disagree a little bit, because I think quants have a good background in statistics and econometrics, etc. But today, a 6th-grade kid can do or claim to do AI. So that's the big difference. I actually feel quants are much, in some sense, better qualified than today's AI engineers. It's very easy. The way I describe it is very easy to build a drone in your backyard, right? But to build thousands of them, go into production, that requires a different skill level. I agree with you completely. I'm of the opinion that AI is sometimes overhyped a bit. But to come back to your question, Jaspal. So first and foremost, yeah, you keep the business at the center of things. So your whole process, your tools and technologies should be subservient to the business. Obviously you have to choose your tools which do the job for you, not do the job according to what the tool does. So that is foremost. And in terms of AI specifically, the whole software engineering, there are so many tools available for software engineering. And now we are seeing the same thing in what is called MLOps, or machine learning operations. We're seeing a lot of tools there. But I think there are 2 or 3 critical factors which should address the challenges of this field. And the first is obviously keeping the business definition in mind, and what Maz said about, what do you want? What outcome are you looking for? So when you start an AI project or a machine learning project, it's very important to define that. So your tool should help you to define that. What is the business outcome that I'm looking for, and how can I aim to optimize that? That's number one. Number two is that it should enable the data scientists to be able to do their job, the quants, the data scientists, whatever you call them. So which means that there should be a lot of tools available for data scientists to enable them to be more productive, be more efficient, etc. Because it's a tough job, to be able to iterate, to be able to try different models, different algorithms, etc., and keep coming back and trying things, etc., is tough. So you have to support that entire process. Then there is data. The difference between again an AI project and a software engineering project is data. Data is at the core of any AI project. So you need to be able to handle data properly, to be able to version it, to be able to institute best practices. So the tools should support all these things. And finally, a couple more. The tool should be able to uh, uh, track experiments. I think that is very critical, because all the quants, all the data scientists, all they do every day is basically try different things out. And sometimes it does happen that you try something, it doesn't work for one project, but perhaps the same thing could work in another project if you just tweak it a bit. But people don't keep track. It's almost like a laboratory notebook where you're noting down things, and sometimes they don't keep track. So if the tool should almost like somebody sitting next to you and tracking all these things. This is one of the biggest challenges that I have faced in implementing machine learning, deep learning, or even any statistical projects. The ability to track. And finally, at the end of the day, it should all work, which means if you are a bank and you have created, let's say, a fraud detection software, right, a thing that predicts when a particular financial transaction is fraudulent, you need it to work in production, which means that doesn't matter if you've written the best algorithm in the world and it's brilliant and it's giving you 98% accuracy. It should work, and it should work in milliseconds, which means that as the transactions are coming in, the prediction should be there, and it should be able to tell you that this is fraudulent or it's not, and with a probability, etc., etc. But that's the critical point at which sometimes data scientists are not able to deliver, because they don't have the skills, and rightly they don't have the engineering skills required to push these into deployment, into production, where it's scalable, all that stuff that we are used to in banking systems, right? So that is very critical for any such tool. It should help support the data scientists from day one, managing the data all the way, going through the iterations of your modeling and your experiments, etc., all the way up to deployment. So that is very, very critical in any tool. A tool should address all these challenges, according to me.
And so it is like, a collaboration where a technical and a business people are, they are all brought into a workspace where maybe say, Paul is reviewing the output of, say 3 data scientists working on different project or whatever. And he should be able to understand, okay, what is the impact, what are the results, whether his own judgment or intuition has been, defeated by the outcome, or is it just revalidating the outcome. So I think those are the important factors of collaboration as well.
Correct. Actually, sorry to interrupt, but that's a very good point. Collaboration amongst all the team members, and in today's world, it's not isolated. Like Maz was saying, you have to have the clear distinction of responsibilities. You have the business person, you have the data scientist, and data scientists can often play both hats, and you have the engineer who's responsible for pulling in all the data. You have to have support collaboration among all of these people so that they're all talking in the same language. I think that's very, very critical.
KK, I'll take your time, and I'd like to ask you is that, for the benefit of the data scientists are also attending this, is that, why is MLOps important now? They were, the AI models were being built, they have these open source tools where they can do some experiment and they can put it. So I just want to understand, there are some firms which is, or maybe they are very in an advanced stage of automation. They talk about, having their own inbuilt homegrown MLOps. So I want, to kind of summarize what is Espresso trying to do, how is it different from others, so that, Paul and Maz and our audience are able to understand that, okay, What is it? What is the story behind Expresso? Why is it not to be considered only a tech tool? How is it helping the businesses? It will be good for us.
Sure. So, I think there are two parts to your question. Why is MLOps important, and what is a good MLOps, and our experience of why we built Expresso. So MLOps is stands for machine learning operations. For people in the audience who are not familiar with this term, it's very similar to what is called DevOps, which is development operations, including CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous development, which is part of a standard software development lifecycle. So MLOps is important in today's world because the importance of AI has been increasing, especially in the last 5 or 6 years, since there have been major advances in AI, and many companies have dozens, hundreds, sometimes even thousands of models which are built on a day-to-day basis. Now, these thousands of models have to be managed. They have to be deployed. They have to be monitored. They have to be monitored in terms of whether they are degrading, whether retraining is required, whether data is drifting, etc., etc. So it's a complex pipeline which has to be monitored, and that's what MLOps does for you, or MLOps tools do for you. They right from the beginning, where you're formulating the problem, defining your business objectives, training your models, getting the data, cleaning the data, extracting features, doing your experiments, etc., right up to deployment and monitoring. The MLOps tools typically take care of the entire cycle. Some of them even go a step further and give you what is called AutoML facilities, which means the ability to even, without having technical knowledge, to actually train the model based on your business domain expertise. So that is where MLOps helps you to just manage this entire process very efficiently. Now, our story, we've always been in analytics. I've been, after my stint at IBM, I've been in startups mostly, but always in analytics. And it used to be called data mining, way back in the 90s when we started. And now, it is machine learning, deep learning, whatever. But and in all this, we realized that data scientists are a little different, or a data science project is different from a software project, which I mentioned earlier. The other thing that we realized is that data scientists are not necessarily the most sort of organized people in the world. They're sometimes mavericks in the sense of following processes, etc. So it's important to have a tool which establishes a good software development practices right up front. Things like software architecture, modularity, reusability, componentization. All these things are very, very critical. The ability to integrate with code versioning systems, the ability to automate testing, system testing, etc., which are part almost like the DNA of the software industry. Those practices should be introduced into this. So based on these, we came up with Expresso, which helps to take care of some of these issues. So, and we've spent nearly 2.5 years in developing it, and it's now getting a fair bit of success even beyond our own company into other organizations as well. So that's a little bit of the history of Expresso.
Thanks, KK. So we are just, I think, left with some 10 minutes. So I would, ask Paul and Maz to, outline some use cases which are, relevant from an AI perspective. What do they see? Even if it is not AI, it's general digital transformation. Maybe if you talk about, say, customer experience, what are those specific use cases which you feel, which are top of your mind, which are very relevant?
Yeah, so we use that, and we've got a very large SaaS backbone, and we do use things like model release manager, etc. And we use it in the IFRS 9 space. We use it for the really advanced components, not your day-to-day number crunching. Let's work out a propensity of a client's behavior. That's relatively easy, to be honest. When you start getting into the real meaty stuff, that's the mathematics behind things like Basel, which are highly mathematical. The IFRS 9 sort of stuff, highly mathematical, and in that space we have been using things like ML for many years because. And what it does for us is it allows us to and there it's a very tightly coupled environment. So the flavor of business and technology becomes very blurred. It's like you can't that life cycle. If you look at those things, are very blurred. It jumps in and out of the different functions like either tech or business becomes very blurry, and those models we train very quickly, and we publish very quickly through the entire environment. And I think there's 19 steps in that process. So if you look at a very complex AI landscape, our IFRS 9 is quite complex. We've got about 18 distinct steps in that from cradle to grave as a model. That includes everything. So that's where the men separate the boys when it comes to data science. Like KK and Maz was saying, you got these guys here that can do like a VLOOKUP in a spreadsheet. When you get into the deep data science, I even think mainstream data scientists don't know what they got. These guys that run around and they go, we can do all of this fancy stuff. Yeah, put them in that complex mathematical environment where we use deep AI. They battle, and they are right. I mean, it takes a different type of person to work in that level, and we use a lot of ML there. It's fully automated. I mean, we can deploy AI models maybe 4 or 5 times a day. And that's cradle to grave. That's from the end to end, and we do a lot of training of those models. We do a lot of trimming and performance tweaking in those models. Likewise on the Actimize side, that deals in real time to the front ends, that deal with things like and Maz will know things that deal with SAM and SAMA and CTOs, the cross-border transaction type systems where we're validating people's who you are, the persons of interest, are they moving money, too much money, is there fraudulent, is there money laundering? So there's a lot of that stuff that happens in real time. And again, they do a lot of cyclical model training, and that happens very quickly. And a lot of that stuff is in almost real time. So quite an advanced ecosystem there. But again, only very specific functions. Some of the more lightweight sort of day-to-day data science areas, we don't use ML. We don't use things like MLOps in that space because, and again, the MLOps like data ops is really only good if you've got a centralized data store where you've got all of this data in one place and you can move it. As soon as you start talking about a federated environment, MLOps and data ops becomes a little bit more difficult. And it's not as easy to implement. Not that I'm saying it can't be improved, of course you can, but it becomes a bigger challenge. And sometimes that challenge outweighs the benefit, and again, like Maz talks, if you don't understand what the end goal is, if you don't understand the rands and dollars at the end of this process, you shouldn't be doing it, and quite frankly, and we're very strict around that. If you don't understand your business and you don't understand the output of what the model is expected to do, we don't do it. End of story. There's no let me go and play and figure it out. If there's no value at the end of this train, then we don't do it. So ML ops, data ops, we use in our very advanced functions. The stuff that's deep analytics, deep mathematics, quant space, IFRS 9. Things like that, we use a lot of ML and data. But the lower level stuff, not really. Then it becomes sort of bespoke, because when you have a federated environment, and Maz will tell you, when your businesses are federated, and you need to run this type of stuff, it becomes very messy and dirty. Unless you've got a centralized part of your data architecture, like in a reservoir or a lake or a warehouse that sits at the hub of the data enterprise, then you can do it. But if you're running a fully federated environment, it's very tough to run data ops and ML, because it's a lot of bespoke things. And what happens is you land up with 20 different solutions to fix that problem, and no one agrees with anybody else. So one guy says this, other guy says nah. Then it becomes difficult. So there it's very light because of the complexity of the business, obviously, and the complexity of what everybody does. And then it lands up being bespoke.
Perfect. Matt, if you can outline some of the use cases, what are the priorities, so that people can understand, okay, where do you see the scope for MLOps?
So I think if I had to summarize, Paul, really kind of describe how it is in large banks. But I think from our side in the corporate investment banking space, it's usually contains around recommendations from a fraud perspective, recommendations around what we should go see our clients around, recommendations of what might happen with our employees in terms of with COVID, what's happening, working from home, like just predicting recommendations of things that could possibly happen in the future. Yes, it's still maybe more in the analytics space and it's not deeply embedded as ML ops, but we have a central platform where we build the models and we train the models and we contain the models, purely because we want to make sure that we abide to a level or a standard that is across the entire bank, that facilitates or is facilitated in one area, because we are getting bubbles of AI and kind of machine learning in different parts of the bank. But if you apply a different set of rules to the same data, you always have a different outcome. But where possible, if you can centralize the model building capability, train the models in a similar way, develop a methodology that you should follow in order to come out with specific recommendations on fraud, on speaking to clients, on specific actions, on, Paul touched on it earlier, around cash flows, specific recommendations at points where the clients need specific products, right? Think about treasury functions as well, because of the corporate banking space we work in. It's usually, again, information that people need at the right time, at the right place, and in the right hands. And that's the critical point here, is that if we don't empower those people that need to make the decisions with ML ops or AI or whatever version of data science that you want to put forward, then it doesn't matter whatever you do. Like I always see this meme, so those like funny cartoon things that people make mockeries of AI. I think of something from Scooby-Doo, and he says, there's a guy just about to pull off his mask to see who this criminal is, and then underneath the mask it's AI. There's this AI on top of the mask, and he pulls it off, and it's like a bunch of if statements all the way down. You know what? People laugh at it, right? But for me, I'm like, if it works, it serves the purpose, if it delivers the value and people are happy with it, so be it. Let it be if statements. But at least we know what we need to do and start off on the if statement basis, and we optimize there. Get the intelligence, get the feedback, optimize again until the person is absolutely happy, and we remove all human interaction from it. That's the value.
Maz is spot on there. Sorry to Jaspal. He's spot on there. A lot of AI we see is just if state. I end up somebody comes to me, pull up when you want to do all this automation. No, it's not AI. It's advanced automation. Okay, let's be clear. All you're doing is building a robot that's got a little bit of more ifs and and statements than anybody else. It's not actually a decision engine. Okay, it's not making any decisions. It's just taking some stuff and pointing you in a direction, and it's like a pyramid going up. It's not that. So a lot of what we do, even that's why we don't even deploy. We come back to that point where we don't deploy ML and data ops in the federated business, in our federated business. Because if I go and scratch under the covers in the federated business, it's all if and statements, question marks, if and. When we deploy these tools is when you're dealing with real AI, when you really dealing with AI. Most businesses are doing ifs and and statements. Let's be clear. You can do that on a spreadsheet. Yes, it's a big spreadsheet, but it's a decision tree. Let's be honest. Okay, if you don't understand the variables, So Baz is absolutely spot on that one. I love that one.
So it is, yeah. I think we, KK, Maz, and Paul, you all have done an excellent job in terms of demystifying, and I think it is all about augmenting. I think when you talk about AI, it is always about augmenting intelligence. I think I read somewhere that when you try to say artificial intelligence, it doesn't give the human aspect to it, a human touch to it. And if an advanced level of analytics is helping you take a business decision, it is not something that you need to replace that with something more complex. It is finally the business that has to get the results, and if the simpler the solution, the better it is. So I think this has been very, very insightful. I think this is the first of the 5 webinar series that we are planning, and the theme would be consistent around we will be focusing on the Africa market as well, and we would be primarily talking about what are the next stage, what kind of an less on the technical front, but what kind of an architecture, or what are the practical business considerations which are to be taken into consideration before going ahead with building an AI system. So we are doing an effort there, and maybe Paul and Maz will reach out. Ekta may reach out to you, and we can have your participation for one of those next webinars as well. So thank you from my side, and over to you, Ekta.
Thank you, Mr. Jaspal. So before I wrap up and thank everyone, there is one question which audience has put on the personal window, chat window to me. They mentioned, please throw some lights on what are the general guidelines that Espresso.ai recommends for the data scientist in terms of MLOps. If you can just take that one.
KK?
Yeah, sure, maybe. Yeah, sure. I'll take that. So again, in my experience, right, data scientists are focused on obviously building the models and training data, etc., and solving the business problem. But what we have found is that sometimes the software engineering best principles don't really get adopted by this, because they tend to work, for example, in Jupyter notebooks. At least if they're using Python, that becomes a monolithic piece of code and so on and so forth. So they should think about their models in a way that the code that in a way that is reusable. So, for example, if you data science, a typical machine learning problem involves things like cleaning data, extracting features, and then finally training the model. So if you can think of this in a modular way, in a reusable way, so that maybe some of the cleaning stuff that you're doing can be reused by other people, or maybe some of the feature extraction can be reused. The features that you use can be reused. So it's all about collaboration, and these are some of the best practices that one can incorporate. The other thing is to absorb technologies that are there in the engineering world, containerization, data versioning, deployment to container orchestration systems, etc. These will help data scientists. They're what I call the plumbing. The plumbing should be taken care of. You should have a basic understanding of that plumbing in order to be able to deploy your models to production. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. If you have developed the best model in the world, it's no use if it's not being used. So yeah, very short answer to this. It's a we can go into much more detail in maybe future webinars.
Ekta, I have a suggestion. We can also email an answer to all the audience. So we did not have enough time, but,
Yes.
because the focus is on demystifying, so it was more important to listen to Paul and Maz, because they are bringing in that practical on-ground experience from financial services. So they can drop in or email their questions, and we can answer.
Of
we
course.
can take help from
Of
Paul
course.
and Maz as well to answer some of them.
Of course, we can do that. So on that note, as audiences, if you have any questions, you can directly get in touch with my team. They're already in touch with you, and put your respective questions to Maz or Paul or to Espresso.ai. We would love to take that. So on that note, closing note, I would like to thank our thought leaders, Paul and Maz, for taking out your precious time and being here with us, sharing your thoughts and insights with our audience. And of course, a partner, Espresso.ai, for associating with us and making this webinar interesting, having all the data scientists here. So thank you, everyone. We'll be sharing a video link with you shortly, maybe in a day or two, with Paul, with Maz, and with all the audience to keep you updated. And soon we are going to come out with a series 2. So again, we are going to reach out to you to have your presence, to join in for the interesting session and have more questions. Yes. So thank you on that note, and have a nice evening, and thank you. Stay safe, everyone.
Thank
you very much.
Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.